What's going on, guys? This is part 3 of the Python control server, and today we're going to be looking at fully implementing AES encryption on both the server and the client. Before we get into any code, let's take a look at the finished demo. So you can see I'm running the Python server debug script here. I'm going to go ahead and fire that up, and on my secondary computer here I'm going to run the client. Alright, there we go. The reason I'm running the debug version is it gives you more messages like the bytes received and things of that sort. So let me run a few commands here. Alright, so if I do a directory command, you can see we get the full output. On the part 2, we had an issue where any message that was 1024 bytes or longer would return an error, and here you can see that we just received over that amount. So that's mainly what we're gonna be working on today. But before doing that, let me show you guys a little bit more of the demo so you guys can see how solid the code actually is. Let's do a directory on the Windows directory here. You can see we got all of that, no problem. Alright, time to look at some code. Here on the server script, I don't think we added anything new here. This is pretty much the same as part 2. So if you haven't checked it out, you might as well just check that part out and you get to know everything that's happening here. Oh yeah, only this was added, which is an additional argument to print the data, because we were getting a blank line after each block of code. So in putting this argument, that allows us to display the code appended together instead of with blank lines in between. Now onto the real stuff here. In the client script, there's also not much here. In the main functions, they're still the same thing. Now the fun starts right about here. So here, once we execute a command from subprocess and we get the output of that command, we go ahead, decode it to ASCII and convert it into a string or whatever. And now this is where we check if the output of that command is larger than the limit of bytes we set over here. So I went with 675 as a limit, and I know we're working with 1024 bytes at a time. However, you have to understand that PyAES script actually appends data to this 675 bytes. So setting this limit allows us to work with smaller chunks of data. Alright? So we go ahead and check if the message is larger than the limit of bytes we set. If that is the case, then we divide it by the limit of bytes, round it, and convert it to an integer. And then we divide this number here with the amount of length from the message. Alright? So basically, if the message is like 2000 bytes, we're gonna need like 3 or 4 separate encrypted messages to be able to send the entire output of that command. Alright, now we have a little loop here to determine how many parts we're actually gonna need, so we keep +1 at it, and while the amount of data is still smaller than the amount we're looking for, we're going to keep adding +1 and dividing it again. Add +1, divide it again. Now, we also need to go ahead and convert this number here from a float to an integer. And that's because sometimes you're going to get, like, instead of 631 precise bytes, it's going to be 631.3 or something like that. In which case, we need to convert it to an int, and we'll deal with the broken percentages off later, right? And now this is basically where everything happens. We basically set x to 1 and we set the position of characters that we're gonna start sending the data. And while x is smaller than the amount of messages that we need to send, so this calc message variable here is gonna know, for example, okay, we need to send 10 messages to send the entire output of the directory command. So this is gonna be 1, 2, 3, and each block of code is gonna have approximately the same size, which should be around 600 bytes or so. We basically go ahead and get that chunk of characters. So we start at the character position here, which always begins at 0, and then we're going to be appending more and more. So for example, it starts at 0, and then it starts at 600, and then we add another 600, it starts at 1200, and then 1800, and so on. And this will control the total amount of bytes to get from the character point on, right? Now here, basically once we reach the last iteration of x, instead of doing the fixed length of characters to send over, we're just gonna go ahead and get the total length from the message. And that should deal with the broken off 0.3 of character or 0.5, which would be the case. Remember that we converted from a float to an integer, so that's where we're dealing with that. We're basically just appending whatever the rest of string characters is, we're gonna do that. Otherwise, we just go ahead and add our fixed length, which is gonna be the exact amount of bytes calculated above over here. And finally, we go ahead and send the message. So yeah, that is pretty much the whole loop. It's about, I don't know, maybe like 20-ish lines of code just to do this whole process here. Alright guys, let's do one final demo here. I'm gonna go ahead and run the server with the debug, and I'll have both options for you to download. So the clean server with less output and the debug server. Now let me connect from my client computer. Howdy. And yeah, let's run a few commands here. Always like to run this command first to show you guys it is a different system we're working with. And you can see the directory commands now work fine. We have no crashes. I won't say I'm extremely proud of this code though. I feel like there's still a few points to work on. Yes, we are able to send over 1024 bytes. However, we do have the decimals, so we get points of a few bytes that could get left over. And yeah, for this purpose right now, it's not a big deal, but if we're transferring a file that's like 5 or 6 megabytes or something, and it's going through the encrypted channel, that could be an issue, right? But yeah, let's continue running a few different commands here. Let's do ipconfig, and you can see we were able to receive all that data without any issues. But like I said, I might even end up posting this on Stack Overflow to get the opinion of other people, or if there's anybody out there watching that understands this surgical level of byte precision for encryption. I mean, this is not the area that I work on. This is not something I specialize in, so this is probably as new to me as to you, the viewer. After all, that's what I like to do, is to learn this stuff and pass it forward to you guys. After all, we all love to learn. But yeah, you can see we are making progress slowly. And yeah, this is gonna be a wrap for part 3. I'll have the debug scripts available and the clean scripts without any output. And I hope you guys enjoyed this one and learned something new. And for now, that's it. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.